Thank you, good evening everyone and welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the YouTube Council channel Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Resident Services Select Committee. My name is Councillor Bridges and I'm Chairman of this meeting. Details of business to be considered today are shown on the agenda, copies of which are accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. Please note that members of the committee will be using tablets and laptops to view the agenda today. We're not expecting a fire alarm this evening, however if one does sound, please follow the officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting points. Please place mobile devices on silent or switch them off. If council do have any declaration of interest coming before the meeting, please indicate when the item arises. And we also have feedback forms available at the back of the room and underneath the broadcast. We move on to the apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, apologies have been received from Councillor Gohill, with Councillor Ahmed-Wallana substituting, and also from Councillor Davis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest in matters coming before this meeting? I can see no indications. I can confirm that all business this evening will be discussed in Part 1. There are no Part 2 items to be discussed. Before I go on to the main items, I would also like to inform the committee that we had correspondence, I believe it was within an hour before the start of the last meeting, and it was from the Harmondsworth and Sipson Residents Association and also St Mary's Church. They wanted to place on record their thanks and appreciation to the Community Payback Scheme. As you know, that item was discussed at the last meeting, however the communication wasn't received in time for us to note that, so we'll just take this opportunity to note that in the minutes for this meeting. Thank you very much. Item 5 is the Budget and Spending Report, pages 9 to 14. As members will know, this is a new item on the agenda following requests from myself, and I believe other chairmen on other select committees have also done the same, so you may have seen this on your other committees which you sit on. Carrie will be introducing this report. I've asked the officers do not spend too long reporting it, but if they can give us a broad overview of what this entails and a brief explanation to members to assist them in scrutinising these reports. I will hand over to you, Carrie. Thank you.
Members, thank you. I mean, I'm not intending to have too much of discussion with you on this report, because I think as it's set out in that report, it's very clear what we're trying to do. These represent the sort of savings proposals that we're looking at in terms of all the services that relate to sort of resident services and under that portfolio. There is a requirement for us to make considerable savings this year, looking at that residence total in terms of, I think it's 15 million in total. And so effectively, the residence total in terms of the budget. And I think effectively what we're trying to do across the whole of the organisation is look to find those efficiencies in those service areas so that we can effectively create a balanced budget as we go forward. I think it's probably best, Chairman, if there are any questions that you want in terms of those proposals that we put forward. As you know, the Cabinet themselves have looked at these in detail and all the service proposals. It's been agreed at full council. And obviously, if there are any issues in terms of how we will be going about looking at those savings over the next year, we're more than happy to take questions on it. As you know, this is kind of a scene-setting situation for the moment. So what we're looking at in terms of just setting the scene as to how we've come to build those savings into the budget. And obviously, from a later date, we will start to look at how we are able to meet those savings proposals and where we haven't, what mitigation we will be looking to bring about to create those savings.
Thank you. Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to start off on a slightly negative note, but I feel I have to. When we had this agenda and come to the Children, Families and Education Select Committee, Julie Kelly very kindly, Sandra Taylor was on holiday, so I won't hold that against her, but Julie Kelly kindly sat and took us through in Table 2, and there's a lot more in Table 2 here, some of the highlights of how each of those things and some of the work that was being done and some of the proposals that were being put forward to doing that. And actually I left that meeting with a lot of confidence that that part of corporate services had a plan and it was under control. So I wondered whether we could, without picking up things that are blatantly obvious, go through some of the highlights, maybe the bigger figures, anything that's maybe over 300,000 or over 200,000, to sort of talk through some of the plans, and maybe we can hear from some of the directors if it's their things about how are we going to achieve this. So how is the garden waste consultation going to get £2.5 million? How are we going to ensure that there is work being done to get £705,000 from the fees and uplifts? How is the Christmas light things coming along, all going to be done? The review of the charge of penalty bandings, some of those big things to really go through, whether it be in community environment or it be planning, housing and growth. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Carrie? Use your microphone, please.
I'm more than happy to start, Councillor Bridges. If you want to refer to Table 2, I mean, obviously, as you can see there, the first item on that spreadsheet is the charging for green waste. As you know, we have gone out to consultation in relation to the green waste charging provision. We are currently looking at those consultation responses, and we will be working with members of the Cabinet to agree or not agree the next phases relating to that consultation approach. Effectively, though, there is a £2.5 million saving that we're looking to provide through our garden waste proposal. And so, again, we can't obviously second-guess that outcome of that consultation, but effectively what we've done in terms of the proposals and where we've got to in terms of £2.5 million is the fact that we have looked at this borough. We've looked at how people operate within this borough around green waste. We've looked to find a solution that is as cost-effective as it can be and can be put in a speedy way. And we've looked at those percentage levels that we think we can get to make that £2.5 million saving. So a lot of work has gone into understanding how we can generate that income at that level in relation to the way in which people operate currently within the borough around green waste. So I think hopefully that gives you a flavour for what we're doing in terms of bringing that particular process into play. In terms of the fees and charges uplifts, as you know, we've already put fees and charges up by a percentage this year as part of the budget. The work that we will need to do over this year is to assess demand, because whenever we put fees and charges up, we do also have to review demand and make sure that those demand levels stay where we're expecting them to be. But again, those calculations and the work that we've done, and we've done a huge amount of benchmarking around those fees and charges as well. We've looked at anomalies across those fees and charges when we've been setting the new budget. And so effectively, we believe, in terms of that uplift, we're pretty aware of what that entails. The issue for us will be to manage that demand and make sure that through that monitoring process, the demand can meet that uplift that we're looking for. In terms of other areas down here, again, review of crematoria and cemetery charges. Those charges have gone up again in the budget, as members will be aware. I guess the issue again there is around, dare I say, demand. I think where we are looking in terms of those fees as well, we basically need to make sure that when we're considering those charges, we need to look at what our neighbours are doing as well. So watching those costs against neighbouring boroughs is really, really important to us. And it may well be that when we're looking at fees and charges generally across the borough, we need to keep an eye on those fees and maybe look to review them within year and not just at the beginning of the year. And so those are sort of approaches that we want to take now in a much more sort of rigorous way to really understand the fees and charges and how they're operating on a monthly basis. In terms of the review of the charging parking penalty level banding, Richard, I'm sure you'll probably want to take members through that in more detail, but I understand it's to do with the banding that's come in and the implications of the GLA banding.
Yep. Yeah, so we were, as you may be aware, Cabinet did agree to consult, and we did consult on increasing the, or applying to move from Band B fine levels for parking and moving traffic offences to Band A. we're progressing through that development, but in January time, a new proposal from the GLA, from London councils via the GLA to actually increase the fine levels across the whole of London, superseded our proposal and went through. So the fine levels have increased across the piece for London. So the 600,000 and indeed the 140,000, which is a few lines down under the title Increase in Parking Enforcement Charges, reflect what we expect to see in terms of increased income from or receipts from fines based on current levels.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to go through now. Shall I go through as far as I know in terms of the community environment areas? As you know, Dan Kennedy is currently on leave and he sends his apologies. I think the really large items there relate to our temporary accommodation situation. So if you look at those savings, it's really vital for us over the next year that we can look to find solutions to our temporary accommodation issues. A lot of the work that we're doing around that is looking to bring in stock at a much quicker way. We've been looking at stock proposals and stock acquisition in quite a big way over the last year. We've brought in almost 300 new acquisitions in 1 year. And that process will continue over the next year, but probably be increased in terms of those levels, but simply because we are probably looking at around sort of 400 homes that we will need to bring in probably the next year. And as you can see, as a result of being able to bring in those homes, if we can bring those in, then clearly the impact in terms of the reduction to the general fund strain in relation to temporary accommodation can come down significantly. So the figures that you see there in terms of the leased accommodation reduction, some of the bed and breakfast provider services, and also the temporary accommodation commissioning process, I mean, that's looking at about 3.6 million of savings we need to make in 1 year. And so that is obviously going to have huge attention given to it, considering we've got to make those savings within 12 months. So I think, members, those are sort of the areas that I've picked up in some more detail for you. But again, more than happy to go through any of the other areas that you'd like to go through.
Councillor Small, do you want to follow up?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Carrie, for taking me through that and for covering Dan's bit. I think it would be good to maybe next time when Dan's here to, whilst we'll probably be getting some budget monitoring at that point, to maybe hear a little bit more from him, as it's not really Carrie's job to answer questions for him, but I'm sure he'd be more than happy to do it, as he always is at this committee. My next question is how we are going to see, so this is kind of like the framework of how we're going to do it, what we need to do, how are we going to monitor that? So like, I'm quite a simple chap, something like a traffic light system I think would look quite good. Are we on green, are we on yellow, are we on red? And then if we are on red, what is the reason for that? There are things here that whoever was running the authority, whatever was going on, are out of our personal control. But there are also some things here that are going to be down to hard work, performance, and then it's for the committee to eke those things out. So I just wanted to get a feel for, have you and Dan had a conversation around what you think future budget monitoring will look like when it becomes for this committee? And thank you for your answers so far.
So, Councillor Small, just so that you know, the way in which we actually monitor our budgets anyway, I mean, I've obviously been in the council for the last 12 months, but what I have noticed is the way in which that we monitor our budgets internally is really quite effective. So we have a situation where we have a RAG rating status across our budget monitoring each month. That red rating status doesn't just say red, amber and green. It says a number of amber areas as well. So is it amber 1, amber 2 or amber 3? And that gives us that opportunity to really drill down and really understand whether we are meeting those areas or whether it is, slipping into that red zone. I think the other area of work that we're going to be doing a lot more this year is around profiling. Because, again, having come into the organisation for me, working to profile those budgets so that we know when those savings are likely to come in is really important. And a good opportunity and a good example of that would be green waste. So, for example, if that does go forward as a charging mechanism in terms of garden waste, then effectively what we would need to do is work out when those fees are likely to come in and the profiling of that budget, because it's probably the case that they will come in the first few months of that being implemented rather than in the later months when obviously probably garden waste people are going to find their own ways of dealing with removal of that. So those are the kind of ways in which you can really start to monitor your budgets in a lot more detail. And we also have a situation where every month, certainly in my area, and I know this goes on in other departments, all of our directors come together for a performance meeting around not just their targets but around the budget. And so every week we discuss the budget at our directors' meetings, and every month we go through the monthly monitoring. And I believe that is a process that's carried out through the rest of the organisation. Andy, you will probably know that better than me.
Sure, thank you, Councillor. Yes, we will continue to do monthly budget monitoring, as Carrie picked up on. We go through every saving and every monitoring for every directorate. So we have corporate monitoring meetings within those. CMT come along with their head of finance. They present what they are seeing within the monitoring position and with the savings. We are now profiling all of the savings so that we can monitor them accurately throughout the year. We will then present back to Cabinet and through these committees the monitoring updates, which will include the banked status to say that everything's actually been done and we can absolutely sign off that saving, no further action required. Green to say that it's on track and we are expecting to deliver that full amount in year. Amber 1, which means that we have some concerns around delivery but expect to deliver the saving ultimately. So normally it means that there's some slippage in year but we expect to deliver the full saving. Amber 2, which means we may have some concerns with the savings. Red, where we don't think we'll get the saving in year, but we may still push it back into a later year, because depending on economic circumstances. And we now also have a written out category. So in the Council's budget strategy that went to Cabinet in February, you'll see in the corporate items we wrote out a number of savings from the budget where the circumstances have changed and those savings can no longer be delivered. So you'll actually get to see all of that data, and that will all come back through the committees. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just like to endorse what Councillor Smord said as well. As Carrie knows, we did talk about this in our pre-meeting. This is all fairly new to us and also other committees, but there is an expectation from members now that we would like to see monthly at each meeting where you are on track, where you're falling behind, and what is being done to resolve any fallbacks. And I believe a category or column, or as Councillor Small has said, a traffic light system would be an easy way around that for us to very quickly see where it is going wrong, where it's going right. We fully appreciate the officers have a lot more in-depth details. I don't think the committee is asking for that at this stage. What we do want is a very key overview of what's going on in each department and each service level. But where there is areas you are falling behind, that's where we want to see it on the reports very clearly and very quickly. And I believe a traffic system of some kind would be beneficial to this committee. Of course, I take steerage from members, but I'll move on now to Councillor Gardner.
A couple of things. On the savings proposal, excuse me, you've got the increasing car park revenue from increased demand. Have you factored in the closure of the Civic Hall car park in that? And also, why do you think you're making savings if you're reviewing the out-of-hours noise service? I would have thought that you need to put money into that as opposed to take money out, because the out-of-hours noise nuisance service is the one that we really need, rather than during the day. Answers on the postcard.
Thank you. So on the first one, the increased car park revenue, so we're developing a parking strategy. Part of that will be reviewing the tariffs, the opportunities there are and the use for each of the car parks. So at the moment we believe that should make better use of our assets and lead to an increase in revenue from our car parks or associated activities on street parking will be included. And so in any change around things like disposal of an asset, and revenue implications are normally considered and will be taken into account as part of the budget planning for those asset disposals. In terms of the out of hours, what we're doing, Cabinet's agreed we need to have a look at our approach to statutory nuisance and similar matters in that sort of area of our environmental protection, environmental enforcement work, including the out-of-hours noise service, where although call volumes to the out-of-hours service are relatively high, the actual number of calls to the out-of-hours service, which results in a mobilisation and people needing to go and actually carry out activity, is relatively low. So we need to have a look at, and Cabinet will be considering alternative options for a way of ensuring we meet our statutory duties and provide an appropriate response to noise complaints about out-of-hours activity, but at a lower cost to the Council.
Councillor Gardner? No. Councillor Farley?
Thank you, Chair. I would first of all just want to echo what's been said about the presentation that we potentially could get on the monitoring. We don't just use these as councillors, the residents look at these as well. You know, they're public documents, and it does say on the first page of the report about the commitment to transparency, so I would certainly echo what's been said, that we can do anything that can be done to enhance our understanding of what's going on with regards to the charges and the budget. The green, just for clarity on the green waste, that's a hefty number. It's under consultation. I presume, I wonder whether or not it can be revealed or not. If that doesn't go ahead, there must be some backup plan for this 2.5 million and where it's going to come from.
So, yeah, you're correct that, of course, the consultation is still being considered and no decision has been made. In terms of whether that decision needs to be made, then we think that the 2.5 million could be achievable because of the number of properties in the borough with a large garden. We've done some comparison and benchmarking against other boroughs. As you know, more than 80% of councils now do charge for garden waste, and it is up to a 45% uptake as well. So I think there's some movement in there in terms of possibility of what can be achieved. Of course, if that doesn't go ahead, then there will be other parts of the service that we'll need to review, and whether that's within charges for commercial waste, reducing services in other areas, or redeploying some of our resources to be more effective. But we recognise that that would need to be found elsewhere.
I'm also happy to just come in there. I mean, like anything on our budget areas, you know, wherever we are not able to make those savings, we have to look to find savings elsewhere. And so, you know, what we will need to do is see what the outcome is of that particular consultation process and the decision that's made thereafter. If the decision doesn't go to charge for garden waste, then we will have to look for savings elsewhere to match that £2.5 million gap. It's as simple as that.
Councillor Farley?
Of course, thank you, Chair. Of course, I mean, it's included as part of the budget to make it balanced, so I appreciate it has to be found somewhere else. It's a consultation, so it may or may not go ahead, and that's the point I was bringing up on that one. On page 11, just for my clarity, we've got R82, Community Safety and Enforcement, which is shown as negative, so that is a saving.
It's in that income budget.
Okay. I'm just curious as to where that, because it references individuals or individual positions in some of these things. I'm just curious as to what's going on within that, or what the plan is. I mean, community safety is a particular concern of residents. So if it is income generating, I just want to understand what that is and where they're coming from. Because again, it's a large number, and I'd like to understand it a bit more. Thank you.
So if I answer that, because that's my budget area. So that budget is quite a large budget. That includes parking. So the parking obviously generates quite a lot of income from car parks and fines. It includes other service areas which are either cost neutral or in some cases income generating, like the imported food office we run at Heathrow, licensing. So that's why as a whole it's an income budget, but some areas of it are obviously pure expenditure for the council, but they're offset in the whole budget against some of those areas of income. Not that necessarily behind the scenes it's accounted for in that way. Things like parking income's used to offset costs in other budgets, like supported transport budgets and so on, as we're required to under rules for use of parking receipts. But the cost centre as a whole is what you're seeing on that page.
Councillor Core.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of temporary accommodation renegotiation to reduce rates, I was wondering what happens if the current providers do not agree to reduce rates, especially when the demand is very high anyway. There are more people who are willing to take on that one, please. Thank you.
I can try and answer that one for you in Dan Kennedy's absence. I mean, what we are seeing across the private sector in terms of housing is a reduction in that housing. And as a result of that, that is causing huge problems for us in terms of finding alternative solutions, if you like, to bed and breakfast. And so, effectively, the renegotiation of rates is an important factor, and so we have to try and see if we can do that at any one time. But it is why, with the backup plan that we have this year, is to acquire more properties from the open market, because you'll appreciate with something like that, with a high, with a high demand from landlords for their properties, our ability to be able to negotiate those rates becomes more difficult each year. So the backup plan is to acquire properties, because we do have the capital headroom, for example, in our HRA, to buy properties in, and if we can use that headroom within the HRA accounts to buy in properties, then hopefully we need less reliance on rented accommodation from private sector landlords. So that's the sort of quid pro quo, knowing that we will try and reduce those rates wherever we can, but where we can't, the backup is to bring in our own stock.
Councillor, can I?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Is the microphone on? Sorry, I can't see the light.
It is.
It is, okay.
Thank you. Just to add as well that we have added £5 million to the homelessness budget. So although we are making these savings, we've shown our movements as growth. So you can see the £5 million on the following table, on page 13. And you picked up on the issue where, some of those providers may not want to reduce rates, and we also had mention from Councillor Farley on the green waste. Just to bring to everyone's attention, in the council's budget strategy, we also had a large increase in the contingency. So typically we've had around about £500,000, which was the 24-25 value. We've added 10 million to that sum, so we have recognised the amount of risk within this position. So that obviously, in an ideal world, we're not going to need that contingency, but it is there and available within the council's budget strategy for 25-26, recognising that there are risks within our position. Thank you.
Councillor Cole, you have a follow-up?
Thank you, Chair. How adaptive do you think we are to reviewing the situation if it's not going our way? So something which is red, how quickly can we bring it to amber or green? So how adaptive do you think we are as departments or as councils when it comes to sticking to the budgets? Thank you.
Thank you. Happy to take that one. So this is why we do monthly budget monitoring. So each month we sit down with each CMT member. They come along with their heads of finance and go through the monitoring position. But before that, each budget manager goes into our monitoring platform, Oracle. They have 4 days to do their forecast, and they're supported with their business partners. We then work with our heads of service over the next kind of 4 days, and then we have some time where the heads of finance are working with CMT members. We'll bring that back into a corporate monitoring meeting where there's some challenge and pushback and kind of getting behind the numbers, making sure we've got good grip on our position. And by doing these things monthly, as soon as we see pressures emerging, it means that we've got time to react. So we can look for remedial action, whether we need to do something differently, whether it's something that we just need to do as a short-term fix, like holding posts vacant for a while, or if we need to look for alternative saving methods. Then by doing this monthly monitoring cycle, we have time to do that, as long as we're on top of our monitoring and that we're doing accurate forecasting, which is where our finance team work with our service colleagues to ensure that all of those implications are being factored into that position. Thank you.
Councillor Ahmed Wulana.
Chairman, thank you very much. And I don't know when Councillor Kaur had access to my laptop. I literally highlighted the question she asked. Can you see that, the highlighter? Yeah. Just to echo what she said, it's very courageous, really, to be aiming, making savings on this area of services. I will appreciate that. But we all know that under the current situation, can we be more open to receive biddings from at a larger scale from the service providers, B&B and TA, because it's quite expensive area of services. So it might be one of the provisions, I don't know, that you are thinking that we can be more open to invite more people to, bid for B&B and TA accommodations. I hope I try to articulate the question correctly.
Sorry, Chair, can I just do that? Thank you for the question, Councillor. We do a lot of due diligence as finance in terms of providers. So we do look at other providers, but we need to look at their track record as well to protect the council. So in terms of TA provision, we look at least 2 years of trading activity, and we look at the financial ratios as well, balance sheet and viability. But we are open to new providers, provided the due diligence is done on our part. Thank you.
Councillor Ahmed Wulana, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just a follow-up. Sometimes, obviously, the residents are, after the homelessness application, they are put in temporary accommodation for a longer period of time they are promised initially. Can this be reduced this time, because that TA service is quite expensive, rather than putting people into adequate accommodations?
So that is the longer term proposals that we're looking at. So we have built up a housing delivery programme. That housing delivery programme will look at either building new homes through our development programmes that we've got on. So, for example, we're currently developing out the Hayes regeneration. Those properties will start to come online over the next sort of year. We have other pipeline developments as well that will be coming online thereafter. And so when you start to get to year 2, 3, 4, you'll start to see that our own development and our own accommodation that we're delivering through building will start to help ease those pressures along that TA situation. But it's also why now we are saying we have to acquire properties that are already built. And we can do that because we have that kind of headroom in the HRA to be able to fund those purchases through capital and through grant. Because what we're also seeing as well is there's an opportunity to get grant funding for acquiring new properties. So we recently acquired the HPH3 building. That was 113 new units overnight that we were able to acquire. But we acquired that with a 50% grant allocation from the GLA. And so for us, that means that the delivery of that accommodation was actually quite cheap compared to buying in or renting in B&B accommodation. And to take to the point as well, once we own that property and once we control that sort of destination a bit more in Hillingdon, what we're able to do then is start to move people out of, you know, B&B a lot more quickly. So that's the sort of longer term strategy that we're trying to adopt. As you know, building homes takes a while, so that's why the acquisition programme with Madison Brook and with various people that we've been using to help us acquire properties quickly, that's why we're able to, if you like, bolster that delivery of new housing right at the front end. But as I say, once our development programme starts to kick in, we'll be able to rely less on that acquisition of homes from the market. Yeah.
Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, comparatives to other London boroughs when it comes to savings, I think, is an interesting place. So I just wondered if someone could give me some information on how we approach this, particularly maybe with temporary accommodation. Andy, I don't know if you do any of that work of do we do any direct comparisons with other London boroughs, and how Hillingdon shapes up against other London boroughs in relation to sort of temporary accommodation savings to our neighbouring partners.
I'm afraid I'm not sure. Keith, do you know?
Yeah, sorry. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
What I can say is that most London authorities have the TA problem as well. So we have been looking at the initiatives taken by other London boroughs, and because we're all competing for the same properties, we're also looking at outside London where we can get properties at a cheaper rate for rental. So we are looking at other options, but also trying to expand on what other authorities are doing in London, which is like a very small pool of properties we're competing with in terms of other authorities. But nevertheless, we're looking at private rented accommodation, long-term leases with Heathrow. So we've got 13 properties we've already looked at, and we're hoping to get 15 total with long-term leasing at reduced rates. So there's a lot of options we're exploring at the moment. Yes.
Councillor Smallwood.
So am I to take from that there is progress being made in acquiring these properties, that we're ahead of the game, maybe ahead of the curve at the moment?
Looking at long-term leases, yes.
Good, thank you.
So just in the last year, we've acquired an additional, I think it's about 290 properties just in 1 year. We've got obviously more to do this year, but you know, I think that we do have teams both in-house and a contract that we use to bring those properties in. I think we've got another 50 in the pipeline at the moment, Gary. Yeah.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering, with regards to, as we go into the new year and the budget, have you got any, for the word, milestones that you've got that are placed during the course of the year to see, sort of measure? Obviously, we've got the monthly report, but is there anything that's sort of like a key dates during the course of the year that if we don't hit something, have you got anything like that as part of your review? Does that make sense?
Kathleen, I think I talked earlier about profiling budgets. So one of the things, for example, we would need to look at, so if you take something like burial fees, crem fees, you know, unfortunately it's sad to say that there are certain times during the year where you would expect those fees to be higher than they currently are on a monthly basis. So what we would look to do is profile those budgets to ensure that the fees that we are expecting in by a certain time, if they're not in, then they would affect our RAG rating, if you like, or our traffic light rating in terms of, whether or not we're on track with that income. If you take the green waste concept, if that does go ahead, I would say by the end of July, August, if we haven't really been meeting that level of target, we could probably say that people are not going to buy, if you like, the garden waste for a half year or for the remainder of those few months. So those are the kind of profiling requirements we're now doing to our budgets so that we can say, well, if we're not hitting those targets by then we are concerned about how we might meet them. But that's why profiling of budgets is really, really important to work with the finance people, so that it helps us manage our budgets more effectively. The other areas that help us manage those areas more effectively is if we're using capital, if you like, to offset certain things, making sure that capitalisation is done on a monthly basis. Again, that enables us to manage our revenue budgets more effectively. So there are a number of changes, if you like, that we're making to the financial budgeting and monitoring processes that will help the corporate directors be able to control those costs in more detail.
Councillor Farley, do you wish to have a supplementary?
I did, but I was in the middle of writing it down. You called me. Yeah, I think it's just making sure that we are able to. If I remember, I'll come back.
Councillor Gardner.
In terms of acquiring properties, do we as the authority work with the council tax department, where we've got a lot of empty properties, and then liaise with the owners?
So we have a number of ways in which we do that. So we do look at empty properties. We do look at anybody that's wanting to sell their right to buy properties back to the council. We have a number of, as I say, initiatives that we work with local estate agents. So we work with a number of partners to try and see what we can do in terms of acquire properties, and that includes any empty properties that are around that we are aware of.
Not sure if that quite answered the question, but did it, with specific into mentioning council tax as a department, do you liaise with the council tax department to match?
So there is a digital intelligence team have put together a dashboard which has got information from council tax and other sources, which lists all of the known empty properties in the borough, over 600, I believe. And Stephanie's team are actually in the process at the moment of going through that list and contacting the property owner, and to open up a conversation about what's happening to that property, why is it empty, what's your plans, with a view to, in many cases, understanding the situation, but in some cases opening up a conversation about how do we get that property back into use.
Councillor Gardner, your supplementary?
Yeah, in that case I'll send you a list of empty properties that are very near where I live.
Councillor Cole, you're looking. Do you wish to ask a question?
Thank you. I just wanted to know, in all of this budget, and because we are trying to achieve efficiency savings, and rightly so, because we need to do that, how are we keeping an eye on services aspect of it? How are we making sure that while we're doing this, and while we want to hit our targets, that our frontline services are not affected? So do we have a specific team which is actually looking at the impact any of this might have on the frontline services, and what are we going to do about it? Thank you.
So we have within the organisation our transformation team, and that transformation team does look at service provision and our service standards, and so effectively, you know, that is the work that they assist us with in terms of looking at service standards. We also, within our own departments, have quite a considerable amount of data that looks at service standards. So, for example, we are currently looking at housing regulation in quite a lot of detail. What we need to understand through those service provisions and the things that we are providing for our residents and our tenants is, are we meeting those standards of service at the right level? And so we have a number of data sets that we look at where we grade ourselves in terms of whether or not we're meeting the required standards, and those standards also are fed into the housing regulator. And so obviously if we weren't meeting those standards, there could be sanctions applied to us to make sure that we improve them. So both internally within the organisation we have performance standards that we have to meet, but also externally we're rated by external regulators who look to make sure that we're delivering the services at the right level. And when you look at some of those services that could affect, health and well-being of our residents, those are the key ones that we have to take considerable care over.
Councillor Cord, do you wish to follow up? No. Councillor Farley, do you wish to... I think we'll probably come to an end at this point because we've been gone on this item for quite a while now. So, Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, what Councillor Cord was talking about actually was something I was going to touch on, but that's fine. Just for clarity, page 12 at the bottom of the table, cross-cutting. What is the employee terms and conditions review? What is that on pensions? What are you looking at there?
So I think what they're looking at there is a number of terms and conditions that are currently in our contracts. If you look at the contracts that are currently in place at Hillingdon, they probably haven't been reviewed for quite some time. And so the work that they're looking at is to ensure that we're making sure that we've got harmonised terms and conditions across all of the organisation. It's a piece of work that Matthew Wallbridge and his team are doing within the HR department. There are a number of proposals that they're looking at. At this stage, Councillor Farley, I'm not aware of what the detail of that is, but I do know a review is underway.
Okay. Right. Thank you very much for these answers this evening. It's been very helpful to the committee as we develop this. It's an ongoing progress, but what I will do from this meeting is liaise with both Democratic Services and the Labour Lead to review what we've discussed this evening, to see how we could perhaps improve the reports going forward, what we need, what we don't need, and we will in turn liaise with the officers at that point onwards. Okay? Thank you very much. You may leave if you wish to do so. By all means, you are welcome to stay as well. So. Okay. Before I move on to the next item, I must inform the committee reluctantly that in my efforts to embrace technology, I missed the minutes completely, so we're going to have to go back to them and get those signed off if that's okay. So going on to item 3, which is to receive the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 1 to 8, are they agreed? Oh, Councillor Small, it had to be you. Go on. Thank you. Sorry, Chair. I thought I was going mad earlier on. We sought clarification regarding the rehabilitation rates of participants. An officer didn't have the information to hand, but agreed to follow up on the probation services. I double-checked my emails today, and there's a possibility I've accidentally deleted it, but I don't believe that. I don't know of any other councillors. I don't believe we've had that information. So I just wondered if we could be sent it. I'm sure it's being put together and great work's being done, but I just wondered if we could be sent that. Yes, Liz, do you know if that's in hand? You'll work look at it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't believe we have got that information yet, so I will follow it up.
Thank you.
Chair, I have requested it from the probation service. I'm still waiting for a response.
There you go. Thank you. Yes. Item 6 is the Landlord Service Annual Complaints, and this evening we have both Gary and Sam. As is standard practice with this committee now, we will not be seeking a presentation from yourself, so we'll just open it straight to questions. So I'll invite questions from Councillor Gardner, beginning please, and then Councillor Smallwood.
On page 16, you've got the background about the key to the objective driving up standards. I'm intrigued by this because, as most of you know, I'm the chair of a local little housing co-op, but all the things here, like the ensure tenants are safe in their homes, listen to tenants' complaints and respond promptly to put things right, be accountable to tenants and treat them with fairness and respect, know more about the condition of every home and the needs of people who live it, collect and use data. We do that and been doing that for years. So what in God's name have other landlords been doing? Please.
I can't speak for the landlords, Councillor Gardner. I agree we have been doing this for a long time. I think the main issue with our complaints process, as you'll know, is that we are not necessarily dealing with complaints very well as per the feedback we get from our residents. As you'll know, those that attended our councillor input day will know that we've got the housing regulator in. Anybody that wasn't involved in that day, I'm more than happy to revisit that with councillors if they'd like to have an input on the regulator and them being present. Big part of that is around how we treat residents in terms of transparency, influence and accessibility. If you look at our tenancy satisfaction results, our tenancy satisfaction measures, you'll see soon we will be able to show you that we've had quite a good increase in our tenancy satisfaction measures over the last year, which is really positive. The one area that didn't increase very much, but still did increase, but only by 1%, was how we handle complaints. So Gary and I, across our respective services, have taken this quite seriously, and we've gone a step further than just how we respond to complaints. A big part of what we want to achieve is how we learn from complaints, and I've gone on a very ambitious restructure within the housing service, of which we'll be going into consultation in the next short while. In that is a person that is responsible for complaint learning analysis against what complaints we get, what type of complaints that we get, and how we then put projects in place to solve the issues that are constantly being brought up. An example of which might be, for example, how to access the service, or how we respond, or how quickly we respond. So we will take that information, we will analyse that information, and we'll look at how do we now improve to make sure we can prevent that from happening going forward.
Councillor Gardner?
Okay, I'll take that on board. On page 31, that feedback and response and action points raised at developing service standards. All the responses, like all the feedback and stuff, that's common sense. I'm sorry, please somebody tell me we're going to get common sense to go, because it is literally, if it's not working, you mend it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, so as you know, Councillor Gardner, you'll get absolute honesty. Yes, there is nothing in that what we're trying to achieve that is anything more than common sense. There has been some things that need to happen to improve the way that we as a service put the resident first, as is wonderfully put on the board behind the chair. And in order to do that, we have to understand that responding to complaints is something that we have done wrong, and not always that we've not done something wrong and that we need to defend our position. We have recruited very quickly the lead for the analysis of our complaints in complaint learning. They started approximately 3 weeks ago, and they are looking into all of the information we have around complaints to try and put that common sense into place, Councillor Gardner, in the beginning element. There's no hiding from the fact that it's not difficult to respond to a complaint. An example of things we're doing is, when I arrived, I immediately said to everybody that they are not allowed to write a complaint response until they have called the complainant. A very simple, common sense step, but has made, it would appear, a 1% difference in increase in our satisfaction with how we handle complaints. There's a long way to go, but we are fairly confident, both Gary and myself having discussed a lot of where we need to go and what we need to do to resource that we will be able to deliver a much better improvement in our complaint handling next year.
Thank you for that. Can I just say, I'm sorry to put you in the spot because I know you've done sterling work. Thank you.
Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think my biggest concern here was to see, if you took Figure 2, benchmarking us just against the amount of complaints against our neighbours and the median and quartile 3, if that was there alone, you think, oh, this is a good news story. It's only when you start to read it, you realise that maybe it's not as the good a news story as. And I mean, from what I've heard, it seems like you've got it you're starting to get it under control. So, what would success look like for you when you come back here in a year's time to this committee? What would that look like? And I was a bit concerned to see that we'd had 8 cases upheld by the Ombudsman, which are detailed later in there. What immediate lessons have we learned so that next year that's only 1 or 2 where you can be saying to me something slipped through the cracks, a mistake was made, which I think if we were coming at 1 or 2, we'd all go, that's not okay, but we understand. 8 seems like a high number. And what concerns me the most is we are low in our complaints, but also low in the complaint support and delivery.
Yeah, I think they're all valid points, Councillor. I've not been here very long, is point one. We've made ourselves compliant. You'll see if you look at Appendix B, I think it is, that we're now compliant with the Ombudsman Code. We weren't necessarily when I arrived. A lot of that was about how we responded to complaints in terms of letter writing. In terms of what would success look like, I'm going to take the answer that is any percentage improvement in the way in which we handle complaints is success. But I would like to see us pushing towards that 30% next year. There is quite a lot of common sense quick wins that we can definitely achieve by next year. There's obviously a restructure. There will be an increase in frontline staff. There will be lots of opportunity for us to make improvements in being accessible to our residents, and I think there's a lot of complaints around how accessible to our residents that we are. So if we can get the structure correct, if we can increase the frontline numbers, if we can make ourselves accessible to residents, then I would like to think that we can improve that service from the bottom up. Because I don't think all complaints relate to the issue at hand. I think complaints relate to your experience of the service on a regular, consistent basis. So I'm sort of tackling complaints across the board rather than just trying to tackle complaints. And Gary and I talk about this quite regularly. To want to take your first point around figure 2, yes. For a long time, you'll notice in the Ombudsman section, there's a section that says a resident doesn't have to use the word complaint in order for it to be considered a complaint. And I think that's really important because we can all make a complaint and be dissatisfied with the service without specifying, I wish to make a formal complaint. You can tell by the tone, by the type of issue being raised. We were probably recording those as service requests. And there's a big difference between a complaint and a service request because one doesn't go through an ombudsman process and one does. So we've rectified that, which you'll see there will be a slight increase in the number of complaints that we get. But I'm not scared of complaints. I think getting a complaint is an opportunity to learn, and that is the journey we're going to go on. It is not that we've done something wrong, it's that we all know this from services received from private companies. It's not what we do wrong always, it's how we put it right. And I think that's the journey that we're aiming to go on, and we're trying to go on. I could go on about it forever, so I won't, but yes.
Councillor Small, yours?
No, thank you, Chair. Good answer.
Councillor Farley?
Thank you, Chair. Page 31, back to that one again. I want to pay over to page 32 and 33. So that was the special interest group meeting that was held in January. I presume that the March one was 2025, not 2024. It says in the middle of the page. Just to be clear, because I came back in time. But my point with this is that I'm taking it as 2025. There's a lot of these feedback statements that have come from these meetings, and you've touched upon it already, is about the communication and the way that the residents find it difficult to get in contact with the council. When you go on to the second part of it, when it talks about members of the residents that attended the meeting, we're grateful for and acknowledge the updates received and noted positive changes. Unless I've missed it, because this is a heavy read, unless I've missed it, it would have been sort of nice to see what of the action points that were put in the table. So you've got the responses, which ones of those are completed, which ones are still ongoing, because there's a lot here that's referencing IT, website issues, and obviously the telephone system as well. It would have been, unless I've missed it, which is quite possible, because it is a heavy read, it would have been sort of nice to see within that what is still outstanding to be dealt with, and what it is that the residents of that group, apart from the website updates, which I'm not sure what they were, what's been done.
Yeah, perfectly reasonable question. So, yes, to take your point on it being a heavy read, 56 pages is not ideal. There's a bit of a journey we've got to go on. I obviously didn't publish the report. In order to be accessible to our residents, documents need to be more succinct. So I take your point on the 56-page document, and we will take away the aim to reduce the size of our documents and try and make them more accessible, not just to councillors and this committee, but actually to make them more accessible to our residents in terms of how easy they are to read and address. So yes, I'm glad you've raised that, because that now gives me some strength in which to deal with that. In terms of, yes, the outcome, so I completely agree, which is why we have recruited a person to deal with the learning that comes out of this special interest group. That person started 4 weeks ago. They will be taking the lead on this meeting going forward, as in the special interest group, not this meeting. And we will be looking for the outcomes to be demonstrated very clearly as to, you said this, we did this. Again, it goes back to what Councillor Gallagher said, it's not common, it's common sense. It's a you said, we did. I've got nothing else to say other than I agree with you, and we will be taking that away.
Councillor Farley, do you have a follow-up at all?
No, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Cole?
Thank you, Chair. When it comes to the feedback and responses, a lot of it says refer to ICT, refer to Resident Hub. So when you're referring things, do you have a deadline in mind? Like how is the time frame sitting with that one when you take it to or referring to some place else or some other department? What's the time frame like?
Yeah, so we have a digital group that I sit on. It's a board, so some of that information gets taken there. I think the straightforward answer to that is more long term. So we're looking to improve our NEC system, which is the housing system in which we use. We haven't invested in that very much over the last 5, 6, 7 years. We will be recontracting with NEC this year. And that will include upgrades and improvements in our management system across the board, which, going back to the point I made earlier, that may help us with service delivery, which should help us reduce complaints in general. But yeah, we have a project programme in place that IT or DDT control. We meet regularly. I'm meeting them again on the 1st of May, I think it is, to talk through some of these bits and pieces. I think the only honest answer to that is that it's not a quick journey in terms of implementing new systems, new software, new services. So some of those where it says improve websites, improve IT, improve NEC, we could be looking at anything from 6 to 8 months before that gets implemented. But obviously the housing regulator's in and inspecting us at the moment, and we have to share those plans for improvement with them to demonstrate that we know what we're doing and that we will deliver against those targets. So Gary and I are fairly confident that we will deliver that, one, because we want to, and two, because we have to.
Councillor Cole?
Thank you. And the special interest group, did you have a really diverse group from across the borough when you said that? Because 8 residents came and 3 were the lessees and 5 were tenants. So did you think it was from across the borough?
Honestly, I can't answer that because I don't know the makeup of that group. However, following the TSMs, which is the tenancy satisfaction measures surveys we did, during that we requested residents who did complete the survey to demonstrate whether they would be interested in being involved further. And I think it would be, we have started the process of ringing those residents that demonstrate they would be interested in getting involved rather than emailing them this time, and trying to get them on board and find out in what capacity they wish to be involved as involved residents. And I think that's really important. We will also be embarking on a project to obtain our equality, diversity and vulnerability data on all of our residents. That will be taking place over the next 3 months. So once we've got that information, we can then use it to make really meaningful groups of people where we can have a good representation across both north and south and also different groups.
Thank you very much. I can't see anyone indicate. Oh, I can. Councillor Ahmed-Ullan, I can't.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is around the complaints at the first stage. Do the officer realise that it's sometimes it's residents of vulnerability not being able to speak or due to language barriers? Can this be dealt there and then rather than letting this go up to stage 1 as a complaint?
Yes, so again, we will be obtaining all of the data we need in order to make sure we can tackle complaints properly. Everybody can be dealt with by complaint in their own language if necessary, and we would take every chance to make sure that people are given the opportunity to make a complaint in the way in which they need to do that. We have to respond to complaints within 10 days. If we were unable to respond because of the language barrier, then we would fail against that target. So if that answers your question, I'm fairly happy that the answer to that is yes.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, do you feel that there's a room to do more in terms of training, staff training, to deal with such situations that they should not be arising?
Staff training across the board is necessary. We have had 6 people go on Ombudsman complaint handling training in the last 3 months, and we will ensure that only as recently as about 3 hours ago, I was having a conversation with the new complaint learning lead, who's also identified that complaint handling training is absolutely necessary, and I've asked them to look into how we can get that training delivered within the next 3 months. So yes, training is necessary. Yes, training will be delivered, and I'm confident that should be done fairly quickly.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. My own question is on deadlines. 17% of stage 1, 14% of stage 2 complaints had a deadline extension in Q4, and I'd just like some more detail on what actually constitutes as a valid reason for extension, and how we reassuring residents that these aren't just being used as simple delay tactics.
So your question relates to the same concerns I have. So only as recently as this week, last week, we've asked for the data from complaints to be broken down even further than it is. I think in order to hold accountability, so for example, Gary and I have 2 different areas of business, and at the moment you can see there's a 57% response within time rate, which is not good. In fact, that's being polite. But we don't quite know at the moment whether that sits within housing management or housing repairs in terms of that report that you can see. So in terms of the special interest group, they need to be able to we need to be able to know where the flaw is in order to solve that problem. In terms of your question around deadlines and extensions, I have concerns around extensions and the validity of those extensions. So we have asked for that data as well to be provided, the number of extensions that have happened and reasoning why. And we'll be looking to reduce the number of extensions that exist. So that will form one of our KPIs. One of the KPIs, rather than just how many have been extended, it would be we aim to ensure that we only extend those that are necessary. Now, what would constitute an extension may be that we have multiple services involved in a complaint that can be quite complex. And therefore, in order to get everybody around the table to discuss that issue and make sure we give a singular response rather than multiple responses about each individual issue, it can take a bit of time to organise that and get everybody around the table. So that's probably the only reason I would see to have a valid extension, other than sickness or unavailability of someone with key information.
I understand at stage 2 they can go straight to the Ombudsman if they wanted to anyway, couldn't they, if they felt that they weren't getting enough responses from the council.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how much of that percentage of extensions has resulted in someone saying, well, I'm just going to go to the Ombudsman instead.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't have that information to hand, but again, valid point. Our aim is to try and stop anything getting to stage 2. You'll see we're quite good at dealing with stage 2, but also we get a lot less of stage 2s, which is positive. But 78% response to stage 2 is still not good enough. I don't know if you know, we have 20 days in which to respond to a stage 2 and 10 to respond to a stage 1. So that is different to the corporate response times, which I think is important to note, because housing is from a complaint perspective, we're regulated, therefore we have a different set of targets in which to meet. So we have to hit a 10-day target, but obviously we're not.
Any other questions, Councillor Cole?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of compensation, I'm not sure if we can exchange that information right now or if it's for public, but when we are trying to make efficiency services everywhere, savings everywhere, the amount of compensation that's gone into, like, through Ombudsman, I think it's it's something that we really need to look at. So handling complaints where they are would be helpful. If we can get the data of how much was given in compensation even off record would be helpful. And if I may ask my supplementary right away then. And when it says the work orders are raised when the contractor needs to attend within 10 days, there was nothing that I found that if there was inspection to contractors' work to see what kind of quality work there is so that there are no further complaints on it. So is there any system in place to check the kind of work the contractor then does? Thank you.
Okay, so I'll take part one, and I'll let Gary take part two. So part one of that question around compensation, again, fascinating. We've discussed the compensation policy the back end of last week, and the fact that we need to have a housing compensation policy. Bear in mind that comes out of a different budget, so it comes out of the HRA budget and not out of the general fund budget. Not having a compensation policy that's clear on what we should pay and set out in what we can pay for things like missed appointments or failure to deliver a service, or even able to offer a £20 or £50 we're sorry we didn't do X on delivering that service, would actually statistically demonstrate we could probably reduce the number of complaints that go to stage 2, or even reduce what the Ombudsman tells us that we need to do. The Ombudsman, we know in many cases, will enforce compensation. If we know that, we should probably take the opportunity to do that prior to it getting to the Ombudsman. So a compensation policy is necessary. A compensation policy is being discussed, and we will look to deliver a compensation policy by co-designing that with residents, because it's important to do that, especially under new regulatory requirements. So that's part one. I hope that answers your question before I let Gary answer part two.
Part two, quality control. Yep. all external contractors undertaking works on our behalf. They normally undertake the larger type schemes or projects. They don't get paid unless they send us photographic evidence of the completed works, and then that's loaded into our system, the OneServe system, for a full evidence track. And obviously, if the tenant's unsatisfied with the tenant's feedback, then we'd undertake an inspection by the lead officer.
Any further questions before I close this item? Nope. Okay. Sam, Gary, thank you very much for your attendance this evening and your answers. We'll move on to our next item. You're free to leave if you wish to do so.
Thank you.
Item 7 is the antisocial behaviour item, and we're joined this evening by Joanne. Welcome back. And I believe, Richard, you may also chip in at some point, will you? Or? Well, there'll be no presentation, you'll be pleased to know, so we're going to go straight to questions. So I'll open it up to members, please. Don't be shy. Councillor Core.
Thank you. In terms of the prohibitory orders, the partial closure orders for tower blocks, I have had feedback from a couple of residents. One of the residents has said some things are working, like it looks clean, but what he's worried is it's probably taking the evidence away that antisocial behaviour ASB has taken place the night before. So, the lifts are clean, or people pooping on the stairs and everything is clean in the morning. Not to say that it's not happening in the night. So the worry is that while that has worked to some extent, the major issue remains still. So how are we dealing with it? And how do we reassure them that it's not just a tick box exercise, and actually we are not doing this to, as he says, to remove the evidence that ASB took place, but actually, and his concerns around CCTV is working and not working. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I can answer some because this falls under the remit of my colleague Donna, who's not here this evening. In terms of, there are other actions we can take. So even though the evidence may have been clear, there is CCTV evidence. We rely on residents reporting to us, and obviously anything they witness. We wouldn't rely just on a closure order, and if we could consider other enforcement action to be taken, we would utilise that.
Councillor Gardner.
Where do I begin? I think you know which ward I represent, do you not? This is going to sound really weird, but because I live in the ward and I spend a lot of time hanging about the streets and nobody makes any comments about that, I'm intrigued to know why I've never seen any environmental enforcement officers, because they're supposed to be in uniform, okay? For some unknown reason, I do hang about some of the hotspots, just in the vain hope that one day I'll catch somebody done this stuff, but I've never ever seen any environment enforcement officers. Do they work very strange hours, or, I mean, the alternative is, do they see me and leg off down an alley? I mean, that's actually what worries me quite a lot. But something that is getting worse at the moment in the ward I represent is, for a variety of reasons, women are getting hassled by people. They're predominantly BAME women, and they're getting racist comments made to them. Now, I know is a crime. It's a crime. I've got no problem with that. But they tend to come to me, and rather than go to the police, because sometimes they regard the police as the enemy for whatever reason. But I wonder, are your officers aware of that as well? Because there is a nasty undercurrent in Hayes at the moment. I mean, if you live there, you can virtually smell it in the air, you know, because, I mean, we're coming up to elections, etc., etc. I just wonder if they are aware of that, and do they know me and do they hide? Is the other question.
In terms of the uniformed environmental enforcement officers, we have 10 to cover the whole borough, and they work 7 days a week between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. And obviously
10 the whole borough.
10 uniformed officers. Obviously, they cover the whole borough. They work 7 days a week between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. And we do utilise them where we see trends emerging, which will be in the wards that sometimes that you represent. And we try and identify areas where we can be more proactive and work collaboratively with other teams within the organisation to address antisocial behaviour, which could be from littering, urinating, to the issues you've just raised in terms of threats and discrimination for people from BAME. We are aware of the issues. We're looking at how we record the data sets now to make sure that we can utilise the resources we have to address those issues. We've got the localities team who deals specifically with anything race-related, religion, hate crime, in conjunction with the police. So if residents aren't keen to go forward to the police and they wish to report it, we can then liaise with the police and deal with it that way for them.
Follow-up, Councillor Gordon?
Yeah, another thing that people mention to me is that we've got lots of CCTV cameras, but I know for a fact that the CCTV room doesn't operate 24/7, and I mean, on a personal thing from the ward I represent, and I'm sure my councillor colleagues are the same, I would prefer it so that there's somebody there when something happens so they can capture it. It's great, me saying, did you see somebody doing something at such and such a time? Is there any way we can up their profile, get some more staff, get some more cameras? Because in the hotspots, that'd be ideal, wouldn't it?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. And obviously CCTV is important, and for a number of reasons, including just the visual reassurance it provides. So it is a matter that is under review constantly. We do report to a cabinet member the staffing position. It is obviously a funding decision at the end of the day. We have 8 CCTV staff plus the manager, which in theory provides a 24/7 cover, but doesn't include cover for leave or sickness, and that's where the gaps emerge, and then we have to allocate time, the time of the officers to the priority times that we know are there's most demand for CCTV use. So it is something that is constantly being reported and monitored, but it's a matter of a funding decision if staffing is going to be increased.
Councillor Farley?
Thank you, Chair. Page 75, the table at the top, 44% of the total are misdirected, unactionable reports. these, question, why? Is this a matter of the way that they've been communicated to the council, i.e. through the website, that the wrong drop-down's been picked, or something of that ilk? Or is it something else, or a combination? I'm trying to understand what happens to them, because I'm not seeing what happens thereafter. Unactionable, okay, fine. What proportion is that? If they're misdirected, presumably they're ferried to the right place.
Yes, Councillor, thank you. What you've said is what happens basically. They're misdirected, so they would come into the ASB reporting team, and they're actually not antisocial behaviour issues, or they might be more based, in fact, in terms of police-related matters, and they're criminal, and they need to be redirected. Or it might be that it doesn't sit within the remit of what we deal with. We would then redirect it to either green spacing, tenancy management, whichever team within the council would deal with it. And also in terms of any evidence that's provided, if it doesn't satisfy what's required for us to be able to prove an offence and take enforcement action, then there's not much we can do with it, and we would then go back and give advice on where and how this could be addressed.
Stephanie, did you wish to comment?
Yeah, I'll just follow up more on the kind of process of raising a service request, be it member, resident or any other person. There are issues with our portal and the way that service requests get filtered through that, with all the options that you can kind of go through. So we are working with digital colleagues to refine the portal and some of the menu options, so that we can limit the amount of misdirected service requests that are coming in. Another thing that we're doing is actually boosting our triaging capability. So we are investing some more resources in our triage team, who are they are the ones that the sort of gatekeepers of all the service requests that come into Joe's service, also localities and also environmental protection. So they have introduced their own filters and their own kind of triaging methodologies to try and limit. That's why we were able to see actually the amount of misdirected reports. A couple of years ago, you would have just seen that 11,360 go in to Joe's service, and they would have had to have kind of muddled through to get to the bottom of what that means at that point. But because of a lot of the work, some has been done on the portal, but also our triaging processes, we are now able to see, well, actually, this chunk have been weeded out throughout the course of the year.
Councillor Farley, you have a follow-up?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, it's not an insignificant number, so it'd be good to find out what the themes are as to why people think it's antisocial behaviour or think it's the council's responsibility. So that would be sort of good to understand as well. I've got other questions, which maybe the Chair will indulge me after other people have spoken. But going to the table on page 87, engine idling, I'm guessing, is AMPR cameras, schools and whatnot, and you've got stuff going around Heathrow, PO stuff. I'm guessing that's what is in there. But one thing that concerns me as well, I don't know to the extent of it, is the fifth one down, resisting obstructing an officer, 545 instances of FPNs. I mean, to what extent that is assault, or there's kind of safety issues for staff. I mean, I trust all that kind of stuff has been, what kind of proportion we're dealing with. This is just, I don't like the ticket and flinging it back in their face. I'm just hoping that is not a significant number of potential assaults on officers. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. In terms of the engine idling, that's not specifically related to what's going on in the Heathrow area at the moment. That's where officers observe people for 2 minutes or more with their engines idling, just sat there doing nothing. They will then approach and then go through the procedure and issue an FPN for that. In terms of the obstruction, some of that is covered where people are approached by officers, they refuse to give details, they drive away, and then there's a follow-up from that in terms of identifying who the driver was at the time the offence was committed. There could be an obstruction there because they are required, although we can't demand details, there is a requirement for them to provide their contact and personal details. So that would be considered an obstruction. So in terms of assaults, no, that's really, really low. Possibly 1 or 2 a year, but no more than that.
Councillor Ahmed Walana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just interesting to see on page 78 the Action Day in Hayes took place, coordinated, organised by the teams involving licensing, police, street scene, private sector, housing, parking enforcement, environmental enforcement team. I don't know how it was not caught on by the officers. There is a burger hut literally just on the pavement. I don't want to mention the name or the location, but that has become an ISO. I know it's a matter of licensing, but I don't know whether the fine has been issued and then how long it will take to be enforced.
Sorry, what was the location and the name of it?
That's in Charwell.
I think in case of specific issues, it's best to probably just do it outside the meeting and liaise with Joanne directly, and she'll be happy to assist. Do you have a follow-up at all, Councillor Hyden?
I thought maybe it's just a ward-wise thing that in every ward, like in 21 wards in the borough, that might be organised, time to time.
Councillor Smord.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wondered on the offence and fine amounts, where it goes into all the different things from bird feeding to fly tipping to dog fouling, whether we can get that broken down by ward.
Unfortunately, that's not one of the data sets we've collected, but it's something that we're recognised, and as we were evolving our processes, we are collecting that data, so next time we can provide that data by ward.
Can I have a follow-up, Chair? I was actually interested, like Councillor Ahmed Walana, on the Action Day. I'm delighted there were some good outcomes. I'm not going to ask how you magically came across a brothel, although that was interesting in that it was dealt with. But I was wondering how you target hotspots. So, I like to avoid talking about our own wards, but sometimes it's the best things you can draw of experience. I'll give you an example at Ruislip Lido. If you went up there on a nice summer's day and at about 7 o'clock, you could probably get a few people for barbecues. If you went up there about 8 or 9 o'clock on a good summer's day, you could definitely get some people for amplifying music, which is obviously, as great as the Lido is and as much as I love it, it is a scourge on the people that live up there, for example. So I just wondered how you look at hotspots when we can predict that particular things are going to happen, and you may be able to issue fines, and how you go about them. To prevent them, because people get the message that they're going to have, if they leave their barbecue behind or they play music, they're going to get fined, and just because it's probably going to make more money if you target places where people are going to be or be committing offences.
Thank you, Councillor. They were identified from reports and intelligence that come from residents in terms of specific issues related to specific areas, and we're trying to be more proactive in how we approach this. And some of the action days that we've introduced, because it's a relatively new thing for the team, have achieved such good results, and this is something we're moving forward with and progressing forward and hoping to work with other teams within the services to identify those. So it will be residents reporting it through to us. It will information come from the police. It will be information from councillors in terms of what's going on. We will set up an action day, organise different teams to be involved, invite councillors if they wish to attend, and then deliver our services from there.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Cole?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to understand in terms of fly posting, if there is a criminal element to that fly posting. For example, when I was coming this way today, there was a fly posting about rave in the warehouse, Saturday 29th March, with a website on or something. How do you deal with that? Because it's been there for days, it hasn't been removed, and it has serious implications. Thank you. If it's a prolific issue, so there are many fly posts about the same incident or same event that's going on, we would look to try and engage with the organisers or speak with the police in terms of any intel they have on raves that are going on in the area. If it's a fly post that's been put up saying selling scrap metal, scrap cars, we would get waste services to remove. If we could identify who the offender is, then we would take enforcement action, which could be a fine, it could be prosecution of the repeat offenders, which we have done before.
Councillor Gould.
Do we also have then fly posting hotspots like around 312 and Uxbridge Road? Because there are constantly fly posting there, but I only see one fly posting fine, and the same issues happening along that Uxbridge Road. The difficulty for some of the fly posts, like the scrap metal car dealers, there'll be a telephone number on, and that will be all the information we have to go on, and to try and find evidence to identify who that person is really, really difficult. And you have to identify the person responsible putting the fly post in that position. It's not the person that's organised it, because we have to prove that they knew that it was going up, and it was going up in that location. So those are the difficulties for us, and that's probably why they're so low.
I would also follow up by saying, as Joe's mentioned previously, it is intelligence-led and it's complaint-led. If we don't have a complaint made about a particular location, we won't go looking for it. So, yes, there are known hotspots, there's sort of busy junctions around the borough, but if it's other areas that aren't frequented regularly by officers, we won't know it's there unless there's a complaint made to us. And in examples as Joe has just mentioned, often the best way to deal with that is to just ask waste services to go and remove it. There is no investigation to be had that's going to yield any successful enforcement. So often waste services will just be tasked. So that's why you see the 1 FPN for fly posting, because it's one of those crimes that's incredibly difficult to pin on somebody to the point of a criminal standard.
Thank you. Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. On page 76 in the middle, it says all in the community, and the final sentence, it says they support police by attending local ward panel meetings. I attend two, one where I live and one where I represent, as I'm sure other councillors do in similar regard. I don't recall ever seeing anyone attend any of them, so I'm wondering, are you requested to come to them, or do you have a list of when the dates are happening, or do the police have to reach out to the council to request a visit?
Ideally, if councillors or the police reach out to us to attend, and there's particular antisocial behaviour issues that we are aware of in that locality, then we would attend. Obviously, we're limited in terms of available resources and officers that actually deal with this locality-based work, but we will certainly attend it if we're requested and if we identify an area.
Richard.
Sorry, if I may just follow that up. When the ASB localities team was formed just under 2 years ago, they made a concerted effort to try and get to all wall panels, and I went to a few myself. And what we actually found, though, is in some of them there were lots of antisocial behaviour issues and people wanting to talk to the council. Obviously, they're police meetings, police organised. In others, we found that there was a lot more policing issues, or it was quite clear that the police were organising those meetings and weren't necessarily feeling that they needed a council representative there. So we're open to attending if we're invited, because there, as Joe says, particular issues. But having been through that process, we found that some of them were ones that it was less productive for us to attend.
Did I give you a follow-up? No, go on.
Thank you, Chair. No, I perfectly understand that. I just say I'm aware that I've never seen anyone. I wasn't sure what the mechanism was. So I'd be curious to know which ones have been attended, but certainly I take the point. And oftentimes you do find that residents come with council matters, and even though councillors attend, sometimes there's questions that we may not be able to answer as councillors, and that you need the expert advice of officers in those regards. So, yeah, I'll feed that back to the SNT teams that I deal with, and see what we can do on that score. Thank you. I'm sorry to go back to the thorny issue of fly tipping. So, page 87, table. So over the course of 1 year, for the entire borough, we've only issued 52 FPNs for fly tipping. Given the, going around, I know it happens everywhere. We all know it happens everywhere. It's a blight on our borough, and I know other boroughs have it as well. We're not singling out, but it's about, we know that these people will not stop doing this unless they're prosecuted. They'll just continue to do it and do it and do it. We've got hotspots that remain hotspots. They're acknowledged as hotspots. They remain as hotspots. They never changes. I don't envy the task that you guys have to deal with, because I know it's tough. But what can the council do to enhance numbers of penalties? Because these people need to be penalised. They are taking the what's it out of us as a borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. There's a number of difficulties that we encounter with fly tipping. One is evidential proof. It has to be of a criminal burden of proof to be able to prosecute at court if we need to. Two is having the evidence to identify who the offender is. You will get somebody walking along the street dumping some bags or dumping a mattress. There's no vehicle registration number. It's not been witnessed. We see them on CCTV, but we don't know who they are. So we've started with these action days to try and address some of this behaviour. Some of it is also people are incorrectly disposing of the rubbish. It's not officially fly tipping. They might be dropping a household waste bag that perhaps they think, well, there's a whole heap of bags there. They're going to get collected by the council anyway. I'm just going to put my bag there as well. Wouldn't necessarily be classed as fly tipping, but could be prosecuted under some different legislation within the Environmental Protection Act. So the difficulty we have is the evidence base. We use CCTV, so where we can obtain driver details, registration numbers, and do inquiries, we do. Where we can invite people in to be formally interviewed, we do. We have had some successful prosecutions where we've had suspended custodial sentences, that kind of thing. But again, I recognise it's one of the major issues across the borough, and it's something that we are looking at over the next 12 months to address.
I'd also follow up by saying that the fly tipping FPNs are £1,000. These aren't the, sort of PSPO level FPNs. They are £1,000. So they're the most hefty FPNs that we have, and we have set our FPN limit up to the permitted maximum. It went from £400, I think, the year before last, to £1,000 last year. So it's a quicker, I'd say, more painful route for the perpetrator versus a prosecution. A prosecution, we may have to wait months and months to get it in front of court, and they may walk away with maybe a couple of £100 fine, if any. Whereas this way, it is quite a successful enforcement tool for us to use.
Councillor Gardner? Yeah, Gardner,
There's a big problem with beggars. Like, a big problem. They're on traffic junctions. I hate going on about the area that I represent. There are a lot operating in Hadestown. They operate. What I find most distressing is they operate on Friday. A lot of them come out because of Friday prayers, and I don't know whether you find them, but they're back again the following week. As I say, the women with their crutches, and please. But they're also very rude. As some of you may know, I can be quite rude as well, but that's what I do. I regard them as being aggressive. I have spoken to the police about it. I think I've spoken to yourselves about it as well. Is there anything else we can do to deter them from doing what they do?
There are consideration we can give to the current public spaces protection order. So if there's sufficient information evidence to suggest there's a specific issue related to beggars, in terms of being their aggressive behaviour or being able to disperse them, because the council officers do not have powers to disperse people from locations. We rely on the police to do that for us. We also rely on the police to provide us with information about the identity of the person that our officers may engage with. So while our officers approach, by the time they get there, they will either leave, we have no identification, no details, and we can't do anything further. It is a difficulty across the borough that we've recognised, and we're trying to work with the police and have some more mutual assistance in terms of how we deal with that. And obviously we'll look at the PSPO to see if there's anything we can include in that which gives our officers some powers to be able to deal with them on the spot.
The thing that gets me is most of them are part of organised groups. I have spoken to the police about it, and again, if we had CCTV monitoring in the morning when they're dropped off in either the big Range Rovers or the Transit, we would be able to get the identity. They also have lookouts as well, which I just thought I'd whinge about that.
Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you. A very quick one and then a slightly more detailed one. Are all our FPN limits at maximum?
Yes, they are.
Lovely. Imagine if every question was just like that. My next question is around my old friends, the delivery drivers, who, ironically, the people who moan about them most are also the ones placing the deliveries, but we'll save the irony. I just wanted to understand how many FPNs we think were issued to delivery drivers, or if we keep any data on the types of people that we are giving them to, because I certainly, looking at some of the rates for to use Councillor Gardner's phrase, the wards I represent, are surprisingly low, but you'd probably, there in Uxbridge and probably Hayes Town would probably be the three hotspots in the borough for them. So I just wondered if we kept any data on them, or how we were enforcing that, because that's slim pickings. I could stand there all afternoon in Rice Device Street and issue penalty notices. Councillor Goddard would love me. I mean, I'd have the whole financial situation solved in one afternoon.
Small.
So just describing a situation, they're on an Uber or Deliveroo or other options available bike. They drive away when they spit all that stuff up the wall, or they are rude or aggressive to the officer, or they're idling. They drive away. What happens next? Because I can in Rice High Street, for example, the proprietor of McDonald's has said if anything like that is going on in the High Street, or any aggression towards women and girls or other things, give us the number, we'll take them off the list. It's not like we're short of people to come and deliver. Are we working with the proprietors then? Because actually, if they drive off and don't do it, we can just get them potentially taken off being able to deliver in that area. Has any work of that nature been done? Then they don't get the fixed penalty notice, but when they can't deliver or from those particular shops, they're going to be in a bit of trouble. Does that make sense?
Yes, certainly.
If I could just follow up on Councillor Smallwood's point, because he did steal my question about the maximum amounts being charged on FPNs. Are we 100% sure we're charging the maximum? If I take spitting, for example, we charge £50, and I just looked at a quick search online. Lambeth Council imposes a £400 fine for spitting, reduced to £250 if paid within 14 days. Bedford Borough Council issues a £100 on-the-spot fine for spitting in public spaces. Waltham Forest and Newham both have implemented £80 on-the-spot fines for spitting. I just find it very bizarre that something like that's quite serious, you can pay £50 and yet you can go down to Hayes and fish in the Grand Union and get a £100 fine for fishing. It just seems a bit odd.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the figure that's put next to spitting actually comes under the Public Spaces Protection Order, which is a £100 maximum fine, but it's discounted to £50 if paid within a certain period, and that's what the £50 refers to. So they can get an on-spot fine for £100.
So why are the other councils charging more then? So the example I gave was charging up to £400 for spitting. What's the legislation?
Have to look at what legislation they're using, because we're under the Public Spaces Protection Order. We're at the maximum we can issue in terms of a fine. It's
so they may be using other legislation somewhere else. Okay. Yeah. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chair. I have come across and served my residents about parks and car parks to not be locked. I don't know if it's a verified fact or not, but if that's the thing, has ASB impact assessment conducted before this decision was taken? Thank you.
So I think it's outside my area of remit, but I believe a decision has been made that some parks or other areas, and some car parks have never been locked overnight, but some parks that were previously locked won't be locked going forward. We're liaising with our Green Spaces team in order to make sure we understand, because it's only recently changed, which parks that is, and to then monitor and track whether we get increased reports of ASB. But because it's only recently changed, we don't have that data yet. Your follow-up?
In case we find that it hasn't, or it has aggravated ASB, do you think we can go back to locking the spaces again?
Obviously, that's a matter for the Cabinet member to decide, but obviously we will report the data if it shows that, so that it can be properly reviewed and considered again.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Ahmed-Ulana, did you indicate earlier? You didn't, okay. I will finish off with a question, and if I may, and that was regarding, where I can find it, hold on, bear with me 1 second. It was regarding members' inquiries. The ASB and localities team say that it takes 4 days for an average response. The environmental protection team, probably a bit more realistic, was 12 days. I'd just like to ask what you define as a response, because if it's the standard copy and space response I usually get, which is we've received your member inquiry, antisocial behaviour, and it's been assigned to an officer to review, isn't really a response to me. That's called a holding email, and I just wondered what you would define as a response and whether you think those figures are actually accurate based on that assumption.
Thank you, Chair. No, it's not the generic response. That's auto-generated when you raise an inquiry through resident services. Been auto-generated, so we've got your inquiry. We will now be looking at it and investigating it under a separate reference number. You will then be expected to get a response within 10 working days from the officer, and a meaningful response, not a holding response, to say what they're going to do, where they've been, what site visits are going to be carried out, and what enforcement action is available.
Okay. The auto response I got on that was on the 23rd. It was from an MEI raised on the 18th, so it's not quite my experience from my personal MEs that I do, but I'll take the figures as they are then, if that's the case. Councillor Smallwood?
Chair, sorry, you have jumped down a rabbit hole here, and I think one of the interesting things about having your laptop in front of you is you can quickly use Google to matters that are related to the meeting. And I was looking at Boston Borough Council, where we know, of course, our old friend Councillor Campwell, and they issue a £250 fixed penalty notice for littering. So I just wondered whether, as a proactive action that we could take away, as I think when we're considering it, I think at the top of it, if we could go away and have a look at all of these and find out if there is other areas that we can be there, because we may have found a potential way of raising revenue. I mean, I'm certainly not against if someone's committing a thing to going for the maximum or finding ways of going for the maximum. So maybe we could go away and look at each of those line by line, or maybe we're missing something here, but there's other examples I could use right now. I won't because I'm conscious of time, but maybe we could go and look at that, Chair. I don't know. Maybe officers have already got a good answer.
Stephanie?
I think some of the confusion in the report is that we've given the discounted fine rather than what our maximum fine is. So the actual fine that is paid most commonly is a discounted fine, as people pay within 2 weeks. I believe our fine for littering is actually 400. We can do a sweep of our FPNs. The other thing to bear in mind when we're looking at our fines, particularly where we have a maximum kind of buffer to set fines up against, we have to consider the likelihood of those being paid on, the sort of impact on people's pockets. And if we do raise them so much, then actually could we be spending more time in court chasing non-payment through the court system, and then we don't end up with a fine at all, it all goes into the court. So we have to balance that. I mean, albeit most of our fines, I believe, well, all of them are set up at the maximum anyway, but that's one of the considerations that we do have to have, is a realistic prospect of the receipts at the end of the day.
Just to assist this committee, could you perhaps redo that spreadsheet again and just put a column to say what the maximum is on each of those items, and we can just do our own research outside of that, and if we find any discrepancies, we can certainly bring it to your attention as to what we think's wrong. Councillor Small?
Yeah, I just think an example would be I don't know lots about Boston, but I certainly know house prices are more expensive there. I certainly would hazard a guess the average wage is is higher there. I'd guess that people maybe have more disposable income in Hillingdon than they do there. But the point being, so if that is the point, I think it'd be really interesting to look at some comparative boroughs to Hillingdon, where, taking your point, Stephanie, to see if there is anywhere where we could be charging a little bit more. I think it would be an interesting bit of work to do, Chair, and for it to be reported back to this committee.
Yep, happy with that. Time is marching on, so we've got to move on to our next item, I think. But if there are any other questions now, I'm sure if we can pass them on to Liz outside the meeting, Joanne, as always, would be happy to help, and it'd be much appreciated, as always. Thank you for your attendance again, and for answering the questions. We do appreciate it. Our next item is the item 8, Trading Standards Service, underage sale of vapes and alcohol. And we have Martin this evening. Thank you very much for your patience, Martin. There won't be a presentation on this one either, but we'll go straight to questions, okay? Councillor Gardner.
How you haven't lost the will to live is beyond me. Actually, my only comment is that thank you for what you're doing, because you've got quite a bad reputation in some areas, which I think is great. So that's basically all I'm going to say. It's a compliment. I didn't swear, I wasn't rude.
Councillor Smallwood?
High praise indeed from Councillor Gardner, which I agree with. I just wondered about how you recruit and find the young people to go in and be sort of like your testers, and whether you use things like the cadets or the scouts, and how they are remunerated and rewarded for that. But also, on a more serious note, I was thinking about how you target them and where you send them, right? Do you send them a little bit further away from where you live? Because what you wouldn't want is some poor young person going in there doing us a favour, getting a voucher for it, and then the shop owner sort of like finding them after school and giving them merry hell because they were the one that grassed or snitched or whatever the shop owner might call it. Protection of our young people afterwards.
When it comes to the volunteers we use, they are predominantly members of staff's children. Every so often we will put something in the all-staff email that goes out asking for volunteers. So that's where most of the volunteers come from, their children and members of staff. The safety of the children is paramount. We don't send them into any shops they don't want to go in, and one of the questions we ask is, do you frequent these shops? And we do try to, when we do these exercises, for example, if the volunteer lives in Hayes, we will perhaps use them in shops north of the borough, and vice versa. We don't want them going into shops in the area where they live or in the area where they go to school. As regards remuneration, we don't pay them. They do receive an Amazon gift card. We usually give them that, which is about £20, and they get a nice thank you letter as well.
and quite often the volunteers do it as part of their Duke of Edinburgh volunteering as well. So they get to evidence that as part of their Duke of Edinburgh awards. When we decide on what shops to go to, it's shops we've received complaints and intelligence about. Basically, the intelligence comes from local residents. They see what's going on in their local shops, and then we will do a follow-up advice visit first of all, and then we will follow that up with a test purchase. In the event that a sale is made, both the seller and the owner of the business are invited to attend an interview under caution. Then, dependent on what is said at interview, a decision is made as to whether to give a written warning, a formal caution, or prosecution. And to be perfectly honest with you, unless there are really extenuating circumstances, then the seller and the owner of the business will get prosecuted.
Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah. What is done with the so if they do obtain a bottle of vodka and a vape, what is done with the product? I'm not asking to know where it's going, but what is done with the product? Is it the officer's Christmas party?
It is retained pending any court case, and then in the event that it's alcohol, it's generally tipped down the sink, and if it's cigarettes or nicotine, it's just destroyed.
Thank you. Could I just ask a question on the disposable vapes? I think it's great that these are being banned completely. I think they're just a nuisance, both environmentally, and I'll also be pleased to see the back of the many hundreds of labels stuck on the bins outside the shops for starters. But with this change, there's going to be a huge flood to that market for them to get rid of those disposable vapes. Are we prepared for that? Are we going to target those shops, as you say, that are on the sort of offence list previously, who we're going to hit first to see and making sure they dispose of them correctly and they're not actually just driving it underground and selling it to underage kids or whoever?
Fortunately, we're seizing quite a lot at the airport, so we're stopping them getting into the country in the first place. Where we are seizing them from retailers in the borough, we are telling them, when we're seizing other non-compliant vapes, because there's a lot of non-compliant vapes out there at the moment, when we seize those from retailers in the borough, we are also advising them at the same time of the single-use vape ban coming in June. And to be honest, a lot of the retailers we speak to seem aware that the single-use vape ban is coming in. Now, post 1st of June, if we come across any, then those non-compliant vapes will be seized, detained and destroyed.
Thank you. Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. On page 90, the third paragraph, test purchasing are typically carried out quarterly during evenings and weekends or in the school holidays. It says typically, and I'm not sure necessarily what it means by if the evening and weekend school holidays are part of the quarterly limit, or because my concern is that obviously, you know, if they're doing sort of like this window during the day, that there's potentially no one potentially going in there and testing these proprietors. So I'm just making sure that we're not giving any kind of window of opportunity that these dodgy proprietors can have reassurance that there's no potential for someone to come in and do a test purchase on them.
As regards the underage sales, obviously we're limited as to when the volunteers are available, which is why we generally do a minimum of 4 exercises a year. So when a complaint comes in, as I said, the trader will get the initial advice visit, and then 4 times a year we might have a block of about 10 traders that we want to visit for test purchasing. And it will be a mixture of evenings and weekends and during the school holidays. It's whenever the volunteers are available. The most recent one we did was done on a Saturday afternoon.
Thank you, Chair. I was thinking maybe if you had someone that looked like they were underage, that was not at school, or someone and it's giving putting the wind up some of these people that are doing dodgy stuff, and that's what I'm getting at, is that there's no perception that they've got this, outside of, during term time, during the day, there's no potentiality for them to be caught doing stuff they shouldn't be doing. I'm just thinking there's an area here where, can that be explored in any way that enhances capture of some of these people?
So, I don't think I quite understand you. You're talking about doing test purchasing during the day, during school time. Well, that would mean taking the volunteers out of school.
If you had, I'm asking if there's anything that can be done in that way. I appreciate kids do at school, but okay, if you I don't know, some mechanism that exists, I don't know what, or someone that looks like they're underage, but it gives a perception to these people that someone is coming in and testing. I don't know. My concern is the window of exposure. Does that make sense?
Stephanie, so you indicated.
Thanks. I was just, Martin's absolutely right. We wouldn't seek to take a young person out of school for doing this. I think the closest that we could potentially come would be that kind of after school window. However, with Martin's, the way that they coordinate the test purchasing, often, as he says, you might have 10 premises, which is ambitious actually to get round in a day, considering they may be at all corners of the borough. And it does take a while. We have to load an officer in, we have to prepare the young person, the volunteer. So you'd probably be lucky to get one done in that after school window. So in terms of us kind of putting resource into that one operation, this is why we focus and do a whole day, because the other times of the year when, it's a busy environment for children and shopping parades, coming out of school, it would be extremely resource intensive to actually plan a test purchase like after school where you could realistically achieve maybe one hit versus loading more than that into a day.
We have occasionally done them after school, and we've managed about 3, and that's starting about 4:30, and that was a combination of briefing the child, taking the necessary photographs, which we have to do so we get the evidential pack ready in the event of a sale, and then traipsing across the borough in the rush hour traffic. The most we've done in after school is 3. Yeah.
And that's probably getting them fairly close together within a few miles of each other so that you've got a realistic chance of getting to the start.
Thank you. Just on the back, do you work with the schools directly as well in terms of getting potential children close to us? If the school's near a shop, for example, parade, could you not work with the headmaster to get perhaps a few kids one day just to go out and do their undercover stuff, whatever they do?
We haven't worked directly with the schools, although the council did have, was it a Safer Schools initiative with Harlington School in Pinkwell Lane? And we got intel from the parents and the headmaster there as to what shops in the locality of Pinkwell were selling. And then, obviously, we wouldn't want to use the students from that school because the shop's just round the corner from the school. But we used the intel that we got from the school, and then we did our own test purchases with volunteers that weren't local.
So some proactive work could be then that we actually write to the schools and say, if you're aware of any underage drinking, please let us know on these contact details. Do they know who the contacts are in the licensing departments to bring to their attention if they see or hear anything of potential shops nearby causing these issues? I hope the majority is no, but you never know.
We do receive intelligence from a variety of sources. We receive intelligence from our youth services team as well, our children's services team, as well as schools that comes into either licensing or into trading standards. So yeah, it's also worth mentioning that the police schools team do feed intelligence into trading standards, and they also on occasion will run their own test purchase operations. So we do tie up with them and kind of make sure we're not hitting the same shop within a short period of time if they've done a test purchase as well.
We also have a very good relationship with the local police licensing team.
Yeah.
So again, a lot of intel from them, and we do joint visits as and when necessary.
Anyone else? Okay. Don't we all? Thank you very much, Martin, for your attendance, and again, apologies for waiting so long. If you give me a heads up next time, I might put you first next time and just put everyone else last. Okay. Can I at least read out the item first, Councillor Gardner? Item 9, review of homeless prevention and the customer journey in Hillingdon, the draft final report. I believe I've liaised with the Labour lead and Democratic Service, so hopefully there's not too much to come out of this. You're all happy? Okay, thank you. Item 10, the floor plan. Councillor Gardner, everyone else happy?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 11 is the work programme. There was something I wanted to mention on that, Liz. Can you remind me what it was? It was a change on an item that got deferred, wasn't it?
Oh, yes.
Parking.
Yeah.
Was it parking?
Yes, that's right. There was a parking item which was deferred to the June meeting, so that will be considered next time.
So that's just an FYI for you all, okay? Right, thank you very much for your attendance, everyone. The meeting's now finished. That's coming up to 8 minutes past 9. Thank you very much. Good night.